Everyone, please welcome to our current new student spotlight podcast session. It's very exciting, and why don't you introduce yourself and tell us like what age you are, what grade you're in. Yeah.
So I'm Katelyn. I'm currently 16 and I am a rising junior. And I live in Irvine, California.
Amazing. And what are your interests in school currently?
Yeah, currently I really enjoy doing physics and math, and that's part of the reasons why I decided to go into astrophysics with my mentor at CCIR. And like given the large range of options that CCIR had like to offer, I knew I wanted to go into like astrophysics because currently I'm really interested in astronomy, physics, math, all sort of really STEM and like technical side of stuff. And I'm really interested in like using reasoning and logic to like understand how the world works.
That's really interesting. Wow. And how have you found this kind of, because this idea of understanding how the world works, but you're using this kind of scientific, almost factual, empirical lens to understand sometimes really emotional, complicated human concepts. How have you found that bridge between science and almost philosophy, psychology, human behavior to kind of understand the functionality of the world? How have you kind of bridged those two things together in your studies?
Yeah, so when I talk about like how the world works, I'm thinking more of in like a physical sense, like the laws of physics or like how I guess like Newton described laws of physics and how different objects relate to one another. But that does apply in like the real world sense and like philosophy and like different aspects of life as well. Because if one thing like it impacts another, then clearly these two objects like share a link. And that's what I find like really similar in physics and like astrophysics, especially like the project that I went into. And I can explain that a little bit more later.
Yeah, amazing. So yeah, in these podcast sessions, we like to kind of see how our students are finding CCIR, how they found working with the professor, and showcase their new research. So they're really exciting opportunities to kind of join the world of academics and see where you fit in your niche. So my first question for you today is, how have you found your program with CCIR? How have you found that experience? Was it challenging? Was it something you thought you had done before, or was it something very new to you? How did you find it?
Yeah, this is completely new, and I found it through my college counselor. So I was looking for research opportunities for high schoolers because I really wanted to pursue research when, like, in the future. And so I was like looking through the opportunities with my college counselor, and I stumbled across CCIR. And I thought this was the perfect opportunity since it helps me get one-on-one mentorship and create my own research and pursue something that I was passionate about. And this was completely new before because I've never really worked with a professor or with a mentor on research before. In the past, I've explored research, I've done my own thinking, and I've like studied on my own about like how to use certain computer algorithms, how to code on my own, but never really something structured with a mentor. So this was like a eye-opening experience because I was able to really connect with a mentor and follow along to how like research is performed and really go through the steps and make sure that every step along the way was following along a path and really realizing what I was doing.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the kind of student professor relationship is quite different than when you have bigger class sizes in high school and you're in a more almost group focused, group oriented learning environment. When you have a professor and you're one-on-one, you really have to kind of step up and challenge yourself like in a kind of different way almost. So how have you found that structural change like between high school and this kind of learning environment to now you're like working with a real university professor and it's a whole different kind of ballpark? How have you found that? How was it different? How was it similar? Was it challenging? How did you find that almost change?
Yeah, for sure. So in high school currently, we have like pretty big classes, and so you don't get a lot of one-on-one time with the teacher. But at the mentorship, um, it's like one-on-one sessions where each time, whenever I have a question about whatever he's presenting, about the topic at hand, like whether it be the formula for like I guess Doppler shift, or whether or not he's talking about like why exoplanets are really hard to detect. He goes through it step by step and makes sure that I understand, because at the beginning I wasn't sure why detecting exoplanets were so hard. Like I didn't realize, like, why can't you just like image them? Why can't you just like look at them through a telescope? And then he like explained to me that there's a lot of noise, and there's also, it's like really hard to see compared to the star itself. And I don't think I would have that type of opportunity if it were in like a school setting with other students around. Like I think the one-on-one definitely helped me expand my thinking and helped me realize, oh, the reason why exoplanets are so hard to detect is specifically because they're really far, right? And so it helped me like realize it wasn't like a dumb question, but like it helped me like simplify exactly why something I was thinking was incorrect.
No, for sure, definitely. And yeah, it's an interesting kind of topic you're speaking about, astrophysics and planets and exoplanets. As an English student, I know very little about these kinds of things. So why don't you tell us a bit about your research project and kind of the steps you took to formulate it? Yeah.
Yeah, so my research project is essentially using computer vision to detect exoplanets. And that sounds really complicated, but essentially what you're doing is you're using like image detection to basically find exoplanets given a set of data. So essentially, it breaks down into two parts. So the first part is detecting the exoplanet itself. So to detect exoplanets, you can't, like I said, you can't just like image them or like look through a telescope, because it would be way too hard. There's way too much noise. So what researchers have done in the past, they have used like countless different methods. And one of these methods is using the radial velocity method. And the radial velocity method is essentially where you look at the like the rate of the sun, like essentially you look at the star and how it's shifting, because when there's a planet on the star, then the star starts to wobble because of the gravitational pull of the planet. So essentially the star is going to wobble and you're going to see differences in the radial velocity. And so you use these changes to determine whether or not there's an exoplanet. So that's essentially the core of the radial velocity method. And now moving on to the computer vision part, you take these like measurements and data, you don't exactly get the radial velocity because you have to calculate that, because the data that you get, it also has a lot of noise, and it's hard to interpret, which is why we use computer vision to help interpret the data to eventually come across the radial velocity and then the exoplanet. So essentially, like, it's a large process, but you're trying to essentially find key details in the data using computer vision. I hope that explains my project well.
That is an amazing explanation. Thank you so much. Yeah, that sounds really, really fascinating. And I guess my kind of new question from that is almost the kind of the process of conducting research in and of itself on a university level is quite different to what we often find in high school research projects, right? Where kind of the teachers say or call them research projects, but they're not 100% true empirical data-based research in a proper sense, right? They're kind of the high school version. So this project seems very, very genuine research based, almost a very difficult process of collecting and interpreting research. Like you say, you have to use computer vision and you have to use or calculate velocity to understand the data you actually collect, which is not up for interpretation in its raw form, which in and of itself is a very interesting, transition and process to undertake. So my question for you is how you found this interesting, like, non-high school process of conducting research, aside from the content itself, but this process of conducting research is quite new, I think, for some students who are quite young. So how have you found that process of conducting and undertaking your own research, collecting, interpreting? How is that difficult or new or challenging or very simple for you, maybe? That's what I'm quite interested to hear.
Yeah. So that's a great question, because I've participated in like programs in the past where they say, oh, we're going to do a research project, but in reality, the research project isn't like finding new like information. It's more like building or like just collecting research that already exists. And so it isn't really along the lines of what we're doing with CCIR. And so something that's like completely different and something that I had to grow upon is definitely like my paper writing skills, my paper reading skills as well, because I needed to be able to understand what other people have done to understand what I will be able to build upon that. And of course, during the process, my mentor was really helpful. I definitely wouldn't be able to do it without him because during the research process, there's so many different steps that I wouldn't have been able to do alone. So like the first step is probably determining my like direction that I wanted to go in terms of research. So at first, I didn't know like anything about exoplanets because I just read upon it and it seemed interesting, but I didn't know like how to specifically conduct research upon it. But then my mentor, he knew about my experiences with computer vision and photo detection. So he used my past research or my past like experiences and knowledge, and he used that as a stepping stone, as like a guiding tool to help me determine what I wanted to really like dive into and explore. And so he really helped me narrow down the exact direction that I wanted to go into. And then from there, he helped me a lot more in terms of like building upon which specific like step that I needed to take next. So, for example, I wasn't sure how I could use computer vision, but then he suggested that I build spectra or like I build an image from the spectra or from the data that we have, and then use the two images that we create and compare them against each other. And so I thought that was really helpful and a lot different from like your average high school research experience or your what other people might call research or like a research project. It's a lot different because you're like interpreting the data yourself and you're really trying to find a new field or you're trying to find something new to explore versus just pulling things from the internet.
No, definitely. Yeah. Yeah, so that kind of mentor role is quite an interesting one, I think, for projects like these. It's almost like the person who helps you make the project happen in a way. And so, yeah, my next question for you is kind of has this experience made you feel more ready for the university experience, the university learning structure, the academic environment that you find in the next academic level of kind of learning? Do you feel more confident that you've undertaken this to do similar endeavors in the future, maybe?
Yeah, it's definitely. So I don't really know how it's going to be like, but hopefully this experience will definitely help me grow into the university level like research. And I think the experience of just running data, running the computer algorithm, running the code, like for like hours at a time overnight, I think that experience definitely is able to translate to like college level research and also the skills that I've developed as well, like coding and basically paper reading. All these skills that are involved in research are definitely coming into play when in the future in terms of like university level.
I completely agree. I think these kinds of experiences really sharpen your toolkit almost, and you feel, I think confidence is a big part of academic research. And once you feel like you've undertaken a similar thing in the past, you feel ready to take it in the future again, you know? And I'm quite curious, how did you decide on this particular research topic? Had you done something similar before, or how did you choose this topic in particular?
Oh yeah, this was completely new to me. So in middle school, I explored space more, explored astronomy. Um, I participated in like Science Olympiad in the US. And so essentially like I was like basically diving into astronomy. Like I was interested in astronomy. And then fast forward to high school, I'm still interested in astronomy. And I've grown my physics base and my mathematics base so that I can explore like deeper into astronomy. And now like I understand different equations and how we derive them. So essentially I went into this research project because I was specifically interested in astronomy, and that's something I want to pursue in the future. And like specifically in computer vision, like I said, uh, I had prior experience with computer vision for another one of my projects that I did. It wasn't about astronomy though, but my mentor helped me combine my two interests into something that I was really passionate about and something that I wanted to explore.
That sounds great. Yeah, I'm quite curious, like how have you found that balance between when you research and when you use these programs like computer vision and you collect a set of data, you have these facts right in front of you, and this is the numbers you have, the data you have. How have you found a balance between the facts in front of you, so to speak, and your own interpretation, your own kind of connection to the data coming from you and the way that you relate to the research in front of you? How have you found the process? Quite an interesting question. It's quite kind of almost abstract to think about, but I'm quite curious how you find putting yourself into your work and your interpretations, your take on the data, and balancing that with a very empirical, fact-based set of data in front of you, or a fact-based approach, if you will. So how have you found this more interpretive process versus a very set empirical process? How have you found the balance between those two things?
Yeah, that's a great question. And this reminds me of one of the times that I was interpreting the data, and I essentially was like trying random values in my like algorithm, and then I presented my like data interpretation to my mentor, and he said, "Oh, how did you come up with this data? How did you like interpret it?" And then I was like, "Oh, it just looked nice. Like it looked like it aligned with what the other current like researchers are doing in the field." And then he was like, "That makes sense because um it's a good sign that your data aligns with someone else's data, but it's also important to make sure that what you're doing has some sort of logical reasoning." So then I like decided to improve my algorithm a bit more. And then once your algorithm gets to the stage where there's no room for interpretation, so essentially my algorithm was robust enough that no matter the type of like parameters that I set for it, it would give me about like generally the same like values, or it would give me generally the same like results, despite the fact that I changed a couple parameters. It showed that, oh, my algorithm was like strong enough. It was good to be used to determine the radial velocity. So essentially, I guess my answer to the question is um, there's room for interpretation, but at the end of the day, the facts are there, and it's a good sign when your facts align with how you interpret your data.
That is a brilliant question to that very abstract, brilliant answer, sorry, to that very abstract question. Yes, thank you so much. It's quite interesting to think of it as almost like a feedback loop, like you get better at almost the research that you kind of put out there as you learn, so you're, as you were saying, even though you change the parameters, you find that the data is measuring up to your expectations. So it's almost like you put it out there and it comes back to you, and you sharpen your skill set as you go, which is like a feedback kind of loop, which is very, very interesting.
Yeah, definitely.
But yeah, I guess my last question for you today is, do you have any tips for others who are looking to undertake similar research or to join us at CCIR very soon in the future? Do you have any tips and tricks, kind of words of wisdom for other students?
Yeah, definitely. Be involved in your research, like make it spend a lot of time on your research and make sure that you're communicating effectively with your mentor. And also, one of my major pieces of advice is that if you feel like you've like bitten off more than you can chew, or like it takes a really long time for your code to run, then it's okay to want to spread out your like sessions more, because definitely when I was doing CCIR, I didn't do my sessions all one week after another because I needed time to write my research paper. I needed time to run the code and understand what I was doing. So I didn't necessarily have to get it all done within the span of like half a year or so. Like I took my time with my research project, and I'm really happy at the point that it's reached. I'm really happy at where I am today. And I think that if I hadn't taken the time to like slow down and make sure that every single step from one week to the next was like the work that I wanted to put out, then I made sure that I contacted my mentor and was like, hey, I need another week to refine my algorithm, or I need another week to write the research paper. So it's really taking the time to do your research and make sure that what you're putting out there is what you want to put out there.
That is brilliant advice. Thank you so much. Almost like making sure that you go at your own pace in a way that you produce what you feel proud of, which I think is a really, really beautiful idea, actually. Yeah, thank you so much. This is the end of our Student Spotlight podcast for today. It's very, very nice to meet you. Your research was very interesting. So very, very lovely to meet you. Thank you so much for speaking with me this afternoon.
Yeah, thank you so much for contacting me.
Amazing. All right. Well, have a great day. Thank you so much again.